Welcome back to the Epic Universal Podcast with Eric Hersey. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and this is the podcast where we cover the latest Universal news, rumors, and history. And as always, I'm joined by Eric Hersey, and today, God help us, we're going to take a deep dive into Universal's Toon Lagoon.
Oh, Jim, I see what you did there.
Mhm.
Yes, I have my poncho on and ready. And, as we promised a few weeks back with the Diagon Alley show, this won't just be a trip report. We promise you that. I know you have some interesting stories and about the creation and execution of this land.
No, well, here's hoping anyway. But before we talk about Toon Lagoon, let's thank today's sponsor, which is TouringPlans.com. Whether you're planning a trip to the Universal Orlando Resort or Walt Disney World, Touring Plans has crowd calendars, ride strategies, and tips to help you save time and money. So head on over to Touring Plans to get started on planning your next trip today. Okay, so this is not our news or not segment because this is news, actual news, right?
Well, I think so. I feel like I can kind of tell what's news and not now. I feel like I'm almost 6 months in or so, like I have a better footing.
Okay.
Now, I think these are kind of quick hitters. I think
right.
they are literally news. I don't know if there's a lot of meat on the bone there. But did you see any of the footage of our buddy Bruce, the Jaws shark in Hollywood, just kind of hanging out in the sun, drying up?
Yeah. I mean, I have to admit, in a weird sort of way, it made me jealous that I couldn't get out there to Hollywood to take the tram tour to get to see this scene in the raw. They've drained, well, back in the day, it was called Singapore Lake, and then it was Cabot Cove, and now it's supposedly Amity. But you can see the work, so to speak, right?
Right. Yeah. The whole mechanics, everything. He was just sitting. Now, I don't know if they moved him. The pictures that I saw, it was, kind of like an overhead shot where it just saw him sitting there where he would normally be and no water around. Now, it looks like they're going through some maintenance until October 11th. So not a ton more time to see him in his completely uncovered. And I don't know if there was multiple areas. Like, I don't know how this works. I wasn't there. Is there only one shark? Or is there like a fin on the other side?
Well, I mean, it's the misdirect. You have they have the guy in the boat who gets pulled under supposedly. Depending on which iteration of the ride we're talking about, there was one version where you got to see the barrels from the original Jaws film being pulled through the water. These days, it probably is just a fin. And the idea is you look at the fin out in the water, it goes under, and then the next, Bruce is coming up out of the water and attacking the tram. So, so it's a bit of misdirection. But anyway, again, wish I could get out there to see that. On the other hand, we should also note here that another part of Universal Studios Hollywood is down for rehab repair, and this is actually up on the upper lot. It's the Super Silly Fun Land that's right next to their Despicable Me Minion Mayhem attraction.
So, Jim, this was just announced, and I literally, you just told me this, so I'm not even sure what that is because I haven't really dove into Hollywood yet. I have a good understanding. So, what is that? A Minion or like? What is that land?
Oh, it's a great little sort of play area. I mean, it's mostly water play and climbing structures and that sort of thing, but it's done in the style of Super Silly Funland from the first Despicable Me film. And in fact, I want to say it's next to the post-show gift shop and Dr. Nefario's yogurt shop where I think you can get the banana, of course, Minions. You can get banana flavored stuff, but yeah, that will come back up November 27th or thereabouts. So it will be up and ready just as Universal begins its Christmas celebration out in Hollywood. So,
Jim, after Christmas, I mean, there's here in Florida, it appears that the Rock the Universe, which is Florida's biggest Christian music festival, actually is January. So about a month after Christmas. So once that's all done, we're talking January 24th and 25th. And it looks like it's 2 nights. And I have questions, Jim. This is obviously this is my first go around here. It looks like, so where do they hold this giant festival? Or like, where do they have these acts?
You remember when you walked up the sort of if you're heading up you've come through the entrance of Universal Studios Florida, and you've got Minion Land, and you've got the Despicable Me Minion Mayhem to your left, and
Right.
Villain Con to your right. As you continue up the street, you'll eventually see Universal Plaza, which has that sort of Hollywood Bowl type theater.
Yeah,
All
yeah,
right, so
that makes sense.
that's where the big acts will perform. But what's interesting about Rock the Universe is that there will be other satellite stages around the park. For example, way back where, well, I'm dating myself here, but where the old Wild Wild West show, Bill and Ted. Uh,
I know where it's at. I know where that's at, Jim.
Okay, so no, that's it exactly. This is where secondary acts would perform. I mean, it's a full night of stuff, and what's kind of interesting about this is Universal has stayed in the Christian music business, where Disney, I mean, they did their own. They were called Night of Joy, and that ran from 1983 through 2017, and Disney opted 7 years ago to go, yeah, we could do other stuff. So here we
Well,
are.
what's kind of interesting, Jim, is that they do have it like for group tickets. Like when I'm
Mhm.
on the Universal website right off the get go,
Mhm.
it's group plus 10 plus,
Mhm.
like order now. So they are really going after church groups or
Yep.
churches or
Yeah.
youth groups. And this can be a very lucrative, I guess, demographic. And I'll tell you from experience. So my mom, when she passed away a
Mm.
couple years ago, I inherited the hundreds upon hundreds of Christian CDs that
Oh.
she had. So wow, I have a lot of CDs. That's wow 100.
Well, no. Yeah, how many Amy Grants? I have to ask.
There was Amy Grant's DC Talks,
Oh
Carmen,
no.
anything and everything at the point. Now, granted, I found them nice homes. I said, I
Mhm.
don't have room
Good
for
for
this
you. Good
physical
for
media
you.
here.
Okay.
But I kept a couple just from a nostalgic standpoint.
Okay.
But I had, in my youth, was drug along with my mom to many of these Christian festivals. So if you're heading to Universal, have a great time on the
No,
21st and the
absolutely.
25th.
Actually, it's here's the secret, folks. I mean, it's actually a great night to go to the park. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's you get a lot of wonderful music, but it's also because 90% of the crowd's there for the acts. You can walk onto everything. I
Oh,
mean,
it's a well,
yeah.
maybe Jim, maybe I'll be going down.
Okay.
Maybe
Okay.
we'll be celebrating.
Okay. Cool.
Jim, there's also another real quick hit that if you want to head, if you don't want to go in January, you can go
Hmm.
down in the fall
Hmm.
because Universal Orlando Resorts, they have announced their special events for the
Hmm.
2024 fall season.
Yep.
So I wasn't quite aware of this until I was watching some YouTube videos and they
Hmm.
showed that there was a luau. So,
Hmm.
and I'm going to butcher it, Jim. They'll want to lay in luau, which is actually at the Royal Pacific Resort. How do you think?
Yeah,
Am I going to get
Nancy.
yelled at online for that
No,
one?
no, you did fine, and in fact, I want to say that myself and well, you remember Angela Ragno? I mean,
Yes.
one of the trips when I was down in Florida when they officially launched this, Universal was nice enough to host us and sample it, and it's got a nice menu and some fun entertainment. I mean, it's an interesting night away from the parks if you're looking, you want to go back to your hotel and enjoy something, but the rest of these events are also at the individual hotels, right?
Right. There's another one at the Royal Pacific, and that's Jake's Beer Festival. And
Hmm.
that's just, it seems like it's just on October 4th
Hmm.
from 6 to 9. So
Hmm.
there's flatbread waffles, famous pretzels, grilled prawns, all
Okay.
types of stuff there. So it seems like that's a nice little beer festival.
Hmm.
Now, the luau is every Saturday from
Hmm.
6 to 8.
Okay.
And then at Portofino Bay Hotel, there's Harbor Nights. And that's like a food and wine event.
Yeah, and I actually, folks, even and that one's fun. But I'm gonna also point out here that if you manage to make it to Portofino in the evening, I want to say they do this at 7 or 8 o'clock at night each night. But if you go outside the hotel and you're out there in the harbor area and just get yourself an adult beverage and sit down in a chair, eventually a singer will step out on the balcony, and sometimes it's a female singer, sometimes it's a male singer, but they sing opera.
Oh.
And you get like this 15-20 minute long concert, and it is so, after a day in the theme park where again you're over at one fish two fish and getting the water sprayed on you, it's this wonderfully civilized moment, Eric. You're just sort of like, oh, this is nice, this is just somebody singing standing on a balcony in a beautiful recreation of a port city in Italy. And it's like, okay, all right, I can now go back into the park and enjoy some fireworks.
There you go. There's a little sophistication for you.
There you
Right. No,
go.
that
There you
that
go.
sounds like something we'll end up trying out. And
Oh.
then lastly, the Hard Rock Hotel actually has what they call the Velvet Unplugged. That's is on
Uh,
November 22nd. So maybe
mhm.
I'll take my wife down there for her birthday. And we'll get to
Okay.
see BB Mac, which is a British pop band. I remember them from what,
Mm.
maybe the late 90s, early 2000s, couple hits, but that starts at 7 p.m. So
Cool.
if you're around
Mhm.
during the fall, there's some nice little tidbits that are outside of the parks that you can hit up.
One final thing before we close out the news segment here. Remember, DreamWorks The Wild Robot opens this Friday. In fact, the day that the show goes live, the 27th. And what's interesting is we just had the initial box office projections for that, Eric, and it looks like they're talking about an opening weekend of $20 million, which just to give you some perspective here, uh, Paramount's Transformers One, their new animated
Hmm.
feature, just opened this past weekend and did 25 million at the box office, which is why I think I've got, just put this out there. I think Universal's deliberately lowballing Wild
Oh,
Robot because they want to go, hey, we said it would make 20 and it made 30. This thing is it folks, this is a really, really good movie. You know, you're probably going to get out the door early to catch this one because people are already talking about, well, the Drew, our buddy Drew
right.
with fine tuning, whose name is all over the billboards in Hollywood. He's called this the best animated movie of the year. Uh,
Dang.
and just gonna put this out there for you Disney fans. This is directed by Chris Sanders. This is Lilo and Stitch guy. This is the guy who did the first How to Train Your Dragon movie. Chris does special stuff, so check this out. But again, just to circle back on this, I look at that figure and I said $20 million. It's okay, guys. Just you're lowballing just so you can crow about how you make 30-35. So just
Well,
saying. So
I would say you heard it first here, but we probably heard it first on fine tuning. So
well, we'll see. We'll see. Okay,
either way. Well, how about this, Jim? News over. We'll take a break real quick. We come back. We'll go ahead and talk about Toon Lagoon.
that'll be great. All right, and we're back. As we discussed in our last episode, there are a handful of elements from the original cartoon world that eventually made it into the Toon Lagoon, especially some of the Jay Ward creations. And I'm wondering, since since you have kids that range from 17 to 7, did they know any of these characters?
Jim. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure if I knew all the characters,
Uh,
which is a bit crazy considering this park has been open for 25 years. And
yeah.
truth be told, I've always heard
Mhm.
that Universal was not scared to pull out like attractions for like their fresher IPs.
And later on today, we'll talk about that especially when it comes to Toon Lagoon. But again, yes, we talked a few weeks ago about how Jaws got removed for Diagon Alley, and then Confrontation it got replaced by Revenge of the Mummy and Back to the Future, my beloved Back to the Future for The Simpsons, which I also like, but I miss Back to the Future, and the list goes on and on.
Right. So what's kind of baffling to me is why hasn't this land been rethemed? Like why this is all old properties.
It is. But the interesting thing is, and I think you pointed it out, that they have, I mean, face it, this is a theme park that's built in Florida. And it needs water rides. Your theme park in Florida, you need to cool people off. You need water rides. So, and this has two of this park's signature water rides. What is it? Popeye's Bilge-Rat Barges, and the Dudley do right Ripsaw Falls.
Right.
But the other thing here is, so you kind of need those. Again, you're Florida. It's particularly in August and July, it's hotter than the sun, so you need your water rides. But at the same time, were they go to change the theme and redo this part of the park, again, you have that Islands of Adventure uh lagoon. What did they call it? The bay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, all the lands are surrounding that lagoon, right?
That's it exactly. And when you make a change of size, like for example, what just happened over at well, are they calling it now Jurassic World with the Velocicoaster, or is it still Jurassic Park?
I think it is World. I know it's Jurassic. We'll call it that.
Okay, we're good. All right. Well, long story short, when they did all of that work over there to make it easier for guests who were visiting the park to actually get around the construction site, didn't they build that bridge that connected what is it, Hogsmeade? Or gave so it was the Jurassic Hogsmeade bypass, right?
Right, right.
Hmm.
So if they essentially took down
Hmm.
the Toon Lagoon,
Yeah.
that would really blockade. You would really have to really trek around to get to there. You'd have to go all the
Yeah.
way around if they took out one section like that. Because right now
Yeah.
you can go right through Marvels,
Hmm.
right through Toon Lagoon, and then you're right in the Jurassic area.
Hmm. Hmm.
So you would have to really trek all the way around it.
And I'm trying to remember what they did when they did all of that work for the original Hogsmeade, when when Merlinwood, the Merlinwood section of Lost Continent basically went behind a construction fence. But
Right. It seems like that's far in the back, right? Is
it
that how
is,
that kind of works? It's real far in the back.
yeah,
So,
and
like, they might not have had to even cut, and that's why the bridge came across, so you could still kinda circle. So, a land right in the middle would
mhm.
probably be problematic.
Okay, makes sense. All right. Well, anyway, to double back to your three lovely children. Did you do any prep out ahead of marching them into Toon Lagoon? Because again, I was just today looking at the pictures, and again, I'm a 65-year-old man, and I was having trouble recognizing some of the cartoon characters. It's like, oh my God, that's Brenda Starr.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Listen, I pointing and so forth, and I'm like, "These kids don't have a clue." We did actually find some Dudley Do Right on YouTube because I knew that was the ride. I'm like, "We're
Mhm.
gonna try that." So we tried to watch Dudley Do Right, but
Right.
somehow they were already familiar with Popeye,
Hmm.
and I really don't know how because at the end of the day, like, I haven't put Popeye on for him. It's not like there's Popeye on every shelf. And
Hmm.
like, when was the most recent Popeye? And truth be told, he's not a Jake Ward creation, right?
No, 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 no. Popeye. I mean, Popeye is fascinating. Well, the cartoonist E.C. Segar created the Thimble Theater comic strip, which debuted in December of 1919, and the strip had been running for 10 years. When one day, for one day, they bring in a character, a sailor, and in fact, he's introduced like again, you know how Popeye is with the anchors on
Mhm.
his arm, and he's wearing his sailing cap and that sort of thing. One of the characters in Thimble Theater walks up to him and says, "Are you a sailor?" And Popeye's response, the first thing he ever says in this comic is, "What do you think I am, a cowboy?" Um, what was weird is that this is, I want to say, February of 1929, and he just, again, a strip that exists for 10 years. He suddenly becomes a hot character, so hot that just 4 years later, he's debuting in an animated. Max Fleischer took him and thought, I can do something with this guy, and had him do sort of an extended cameo in a Betty Boop cartoon, which, by the way, was called Popeye the Sailor. And from there, he got his own series. He took off, and he's been on and off a pop culture icon forever. So, I mean, you get why they would have brought this character into the park. But also, the other thing remember is that Universal had made this deal with King Features to get all sorts of cartoon comic strip characters in, and Popeye was part of that deal. And King Features is still out there. I mean, didn't they just do the Cuphead show?
Right, right.
Mhm.
That's actually like when when I saw that the Cuphead show is
Hmm.
actually something my kids actually know. I actually caught them playing a video game.
Mhm.
So it's like a modern, I think it's on Netflix right now, and
Mhm.
that is King Feature. So it's kind of funny to think that the same brand company that brought Popeye to the game is still out there producing. That's kind of wild.
Well, it's also worth noting here that the Cuphead, at least, I mean, both the game and the animated series are very, very, very much influenced by the Max Fleischer shorts. I mean, they have the same sort of animation style and the same kind of body sense of humor. But anyway, we can save the history of Popeye for another episode of Epic Universal. So all right, if we double back now to Cartoon World. And again, the idea was that this was going to be a theme park, much like the Magic Kingdom, with all sorts of lands that were going to celebrate cartoon characters. And so, one of the original sections that was designed for this park was going to be called Popeye's Island, and it was going to be divided into two parts. We were going to get Sweet Haven Village and then the docks. But again, once Toon Lagoon kind of became the catch-all, we got a lot of stuff crammed into one area. So now we have in this section of Toon Lagoon, we have Popeye and Bluto's Bilge-Rat barges. We also have overlooking that whitewater raft ride. We also have a play area called Me Ship the Olive, which is done in the style of the ships we've seen Popeye have in the animated series. And then, we have Wimpy's, where gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. So
That's right.
did you and the family get to experience any of these while we were at the park?
Well, yeah, we did all three,
Mm.
kind of.
Hmm. Okay. Kind of is interesting. What happened?
All right. Well, let me say. So I'm not the biggest fan of water rides.
Hmm.
I do enjoy them,
Hmm.
but I don't typically like having wet shoes, wet shirts, and so forth. So I think I've only done Kali River Rapids once,
Hmm.
and the both times we were out in Disneyland,
Hmm.
Grizzly River Run wasn't even gonna happen.
Okay.
So since this was our first trip, I knew I had to check these off. So
Hmm.
I essentially made sure I was going to do all the water rides. So I
Hmm.
came prepared. So I was wearing the swimming trunks the one day,
Hmm.
and I had on my Crocs and a thin shirt,
Hmm.
and we head right over to Toon Lagoon,
Hmm.
only to find out Popeyes was down.
Oh no! Did it come back up later in the day?
Yeah, well, it did, but it was down for like an hour or so.
Oh,
So we returned right away.
okay.
We decided then to jump on the Olive to
Hmm.
check it out. So we made it right to the piano,
Hmm.
right before the cast member was like, "Nope, nope, nope, get everybody out of here."
Oh, so you didn't get to play the Popeye theme?
It's a working piano. Like we
Oh,
didn't get that far. We were just like, we got to the floor. I'm like, oh, there's a
oh.
piano.
Well, yeah, the piano actually has colored keys, and if you play the sheet music, you get "I'm Popeye the Sailor Man." I mean, you get, but they kicked you off the boat. Okay, so how did you kill your time? Did you go get a wimpy burger?
Well, I think Jim, you obviously paid attention to my
Hmm.
eating habits when we were
Hmm.
out at the In-N-Out Burger a couple months ago. But
Hmm.
yes, we did get there.
Hmm.
Our experience wasn't great. Turns out that entire section of like Toon Lagoon, that whole little Popeyes area, had a power failure.
Oh
So we
no!
waited in line for quite some time. We
Hmm.
finally got the burgers, but yes, we did actually have some Wimpies.
Okay, okay. So a power outage. Wow. That's unusual. I mean, mind you, it wouldn't be the first time that this would be an issue in that part of the park. And Bilge-Rat Barges is kind of snake bit. I mean, as recently as February of 2021. There was a fire. I mean, mind you, nobody was harmed. There was very minimal damage, but I want to say there was a construction worker on site there in Toon Lagoon who overfilled a fuel tank, and that was enough to cause a blaze. And mind you, this was while the attraction was already down for refurbishment, and And I guess what was it that the irony is they were using the pump that caught fire to drain the water. A lot of people walking by a construction fence, and it's like that plume of thick smoke. Is that supposed to be there?
Yeah, Jim. I think if I was walking by and I saw that smoke, regardless how bad I want to get off the list, I don't think I'd be doing it. But we did make it on the attraction.
All right. So, have to ask, what'd you think?
I think it was fine. Probably one of the better rapid rides I've ever been part of. Right. It's a lot longer than Cali's. I got super drenched, but I mean, the wait. I think we waited maybe 15 minutes was well worth it.
Okay. Now, Popeye's Bilge-Rat Barges is a kind of an interesting attraction and different than what, for example, Disney does with its water rides. Like, take for example, Splash Mountain now, Tiana's Bayou Adventure. That has its own separate water system. In fact, what's so funny about that is that if you ever get backstage at the Magic Kingdom, you can walk by the reservoir out back behind the Splash Mountain. In fact, you can sometimes look in and see all the baseball caps that have fallen off. Whereas Toon Lagoon, the water attractions there, they actually pull their water out of the central lagoon of the park. In fact, what's kind of interesting is that when they fire up the park for the day and all the water goes in to fill the flume over at Ripsaw Falls and likewise at Bilge-Rat Barges, you can actually see the water line go down. If you walk around the park during the day, it's like, why is they're like, did the tide go out? It looks like
Right.
there's discoloration at 6 inches. It's like, no, all that water went into the flume ride.
Wow, that's interesting.
Anyway, all right. So let's get back to you talking about your ride experience.
Well, Jim, I think that I mean it was fun. We got on a group. I mean, obviously, I think it's like 8 or some people on there. And
Yep.
one of the more enjoyable things. So I went on with my kids,
Mm-hmm.
and we went on there with an Italian family who spoke no English.
Oh, okay.
So I honestly got more kicks out of watching these Italians scream and laugh. And there was an older gentleman, and he was just having a hoot during a time. So I had a good time. It was a great rapid ride. I thought it was clever. Lots of good nods in the queue. So I'd give it from a rapids, and I've done several throughout various parks and so forth. It was probably my favorite. But Jim, how about this? I say I'm soaking wet right now. How about we dry off, we take a real quick break, then we'll come back and we'll talk about Dudley's.
That works. And we're back. Okay, so where we left off, folks, Eric is it took a while, but he eventually got on Popeye's Bilge-Rat Barges and got soaked. So okay, so you're dripping. Do we walk straight over to Dudley Do-Right Ripside Falls?
Well, yes. I mean, if you're already wet, my goal was just to get it over with, right? So I mean, but the one thing about Dudley's, it's we got equally drenched on this ride. So this one, the kids actually did this one about 3 or 4 times during the trip.
Really?
They got wet multiple days. Where I was just like, no, this is my wet day. This is the day that I'm going to wear Crocs.
Okay.
But I wanted to go do it again, but then it was about a 40-minute wait, and I'm like, all right, no thanks.
Okay. Now, interesting story about this particular ride, and I know on the last show we talked about how one of the original concepts for this was that it was a dual log, and when you went through the icon of this thing, the sawmill, your thing was split right down the middle. But interesting story about this one, Eric. Dudley Do at Ripsaw Falls was originally supposed to be held back for year 2. And in fact, where this gets interesting is supposedly 3 or 4 months before Islands Adventure opens in May of 1999. The powers that be at Universal decided, I think we may need this. And the show people were like, it's not done. We have show scenes to install. And it's like, I don't care. So I have to ask, when you rode the attraction, did you notice fairly long dark stretches in this thing.
Jim, that is the craziest thing because I had no idea, but that was my main critique
Yeah.
because I'm thinking to myself, all right, so this, in my opinion, is like a glorified Splash Mountain.
There
That's
we
how
go.
you right. But I said there's pros and cons because the pro of
Yep.
this, I think the thrill was better.
Mhm.
I feel like the thrill, and you certainly get more wet, right?
Yep.
But I was like, the con, I mean, the one thing about Splash and even Tiana's at this point in time, it is so immersive.
Yep.
There's not a moment that you feel, but when we would go through, I literally felt like we were going through like a construction, not, or just like a giant box. It was just like, all right, this kind of looks like a giant hallway.
Yep.
So that makes so much sense to me.
There we go. There we go. Now,
So, and I was just saying, well, maybe it's their cartoon style.
no. I mean, don't get me wrong. Having watched some Dudley Do Rights on YouTube, I mean, this show done in '59, limited animation, not the greatest stuff. But seriously, that's why there were these giant stretches of that ride with nothing going on. It's like, what is this? It's like they opened it. They opened it without completing it. And now the other thing, of course, that and again, you were just talking about Tiana's, formerly Splash, which has its 53-foot drop, whereas Ripsaw Falls has a 75-foot drop that sort of bounces up from under that exploding a building, and by the way, what makes me kind of crazy about that effect in the attraction is when you're in the log on the ride, that doesn't register. Whereas if you're standing on the bridge watching that and you watch the building blow apart and then pull itself back together, that is so cool.
Right. And you know what, Jim? I didn't see it. I didn't even know. I didn't see it until I was watching some stuff after the fact. I wish I did.
Yeah.
That'd have been great to go. I mean, that's worth watching, right? So the kid's grandma probably saw it. She was sitting there.
There you go. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, is that, and I've always wondered, is that what's supposed to incentivize me to get in line? The effect of, wow, look at the exploding building. I'm going to get on that thing.
That's it.
Oh, I have to ask, by the way, though, did you catch the Pirates joke?
I didn't. No.
Oh,
please tell me if it's not a spoiler.
Right. Well, no.
No. I know what you're talking about. It's not them talking, right? It's an actual gag. It's the dog, right?
There we go. Oh, what is it? It ends with what? Snidely Whiplash in a cage, but instead of the dog with the key, isn't it a beaver?
Right. I remember that nod now as you speak about that. Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. We've now talked about the two big attractions in this land. Anything else stand out to you in regard to Toon Lagoon?
Oh, Jim, this land is kind of weird to me. So I felt like super nostalgic, but I couldn't name half the characters. So it was weird. But what, like, I remember looking at comic strips as a kid. I'm not necessarily sure when or so forth, but I just can't imagine anyone like to this day being like super enthused about these characters. So it drummed up a lot of conversations after the fact because I ended up having conversations with my brother and a couple friends and just like, when was the last time you looked at a newspaper like Funny Pages? Do they even still exist?
Yeah, they do. But it's kind of fascinating that you say that because I'm one of the people who remembers them. But for example, every morning, I go online and there's like 4 and 5 strips that I will look at, but I go to, I want to say Go Comics or Comics Kingdom and get these strips. But I mean, just today I was at the VA getting some blood work done, and I was in the lobby. And normally there's a newspaper there that I can pick up, but I can look at the comics. And wasn't a single newspaper in the building. I mean, I grow concerned for my friends who work in print. But anyway, all right. So it's tough walking through that land today, especially now that it looks like even Universal is kind of looking at Toon Lagoon and going, I mean, did you hear where the big restaurant, the quick service in there, the comic strip cafe where you can go get
Right.
pizza and burgers and Asian, and it just went seasonal. They literally shut it down.
Jim, it was in the middle of July,
Yeah,
super, super hot. We
yeah.
walked in there in the middle of the day and it was closed. We sat there. They let us sit there. So
Okay.
that's when the kids did Dudley's 3
Hmm.
times.
Okay.
But yeah, it's crazy that they're like, it seems there's aspects there that they should be thinking about. I mean, that's a big piece of land
Well, no, no,
with
no.
IP that
No.
I don't know if it's going to move any needles.
Okay, now speaking of big pieces of land, when you walked up the hill there out of Marvel Superhero Island, I'm sure you saw off to the left there well, what used to be what, the Pandemonium Cartoon Circus Theater.
Right,
Oh,
right. No, I saw that and I was disappointed because I mean, granted, like we all know, I went into this kind of blind on purpose.
yep.
And I was like, all right, when's the show start? Because I do feel like that's the missing piece of this land. To me,
Yeah.
I'm like, we got cartoons. There should
Mhm.
be some type of show
Yep.
where I would have loved a dark ride where I wasn't forced to be, splattered with water. But a show would have been great, but yet that doesn't exist anymore, right?
Yeah, and again, the Pandemonium Cartoon Circus really was only up and running for the first year, maybe two, of Toon Lagoon, and but again, the very thing you were talking about, the main drag there at Toon Lagoon was the same problem that the Pandemonium Cartoon Circus had. I mean, you went in and you saw Rocky and Bullwinkle, you saw Popeye, you saw Betty Boop, and a bunch of other cartoon characters. To be honest, people your age really didn't know, and it was expensive to operate with a big cast, and so eventually it closes. And but again, so you've seen the YouTube video of that?
I did. I saw the YouTube video. I looked it up. I
Okay.
did. It was quite an interesting show. I'll tell you that, Jim.
Okay, now did you then go on to look at some of the other shows that Universal has tried in that space, or?
So, did they end up putting like a BMX show in there?
They did. They did. And in fact, one year, in fact, the year they switched parks for Halloween Horror Nights, they staged Bill and Ted's in there.
Okay.
In fact, when they did the Harry Potter celebrations, these were events that weekends they held in at the Universal Orlando Resort from 2014 to 2018. You could go in there and they had the guy from the movie who did the wand combat, and you could literally go in and he would teach you how to do wand combat
Huh.
on stage. But
It seems like they've just had issues with that area or they just haven't found the right mix.
it is so interesting you say that, because and again, I have friends who work in Universal Creative, and for example, they were telling me that now remember, Universal released Secret Life of Pets, that Illumination film, back in July of 2016, and there
Mm.
was a sequel in June of 2019, and those were popular enough that the Universal prepared a, an attraction. In fact, the original iteration of the Secret Life of Pets ride featured trackless vehicles, Eric, and it was supposed to be built um, on top of the old Pandemonium Circus building. And in the end, Universal, it's like, I mean, the problem is once we build that, we're kind of stuck with it. And so hang on, back off. And now, mind you, they still love the idea of a ride involving Secret Life of Pets. So they went with a tracked version of it called Off the Leash. And what was interesting about that is they built it out at Universal Studios Hollywood, and they had actually begun showing it to the press in March of 2020.
Oh, great, great. So a
Yet
couple days.
couple days, and then then the pandemic shows up and they shut it down, and it doesn't then get open till April of 2021. But what's fascinating, when you talk with the people at Universal Creative, they're like, it's like, man, and that's what the beauty part of what you did with your family. You rode the two rides that they just can't bring themselves to shut down. Dudley Do Right, Ripsaw Falls, and Popeye and Bluto's Bilge-Rat barges because, again, theme parks in Florida need water rides, but at the same time, they have this giant piece of real estate in the middle of this park. And I honestly, Eric, I have had more folks at Universal Creative talk about, yeah, we just looked at Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like what we could do in that space, and the notion was what ride we could fit in there. Like, for example, with Lord of the Rings, in fact, they were talking about. Do you remember in, I want to say, the first Hobbit movie? They have that scene where everybody's in barrels floating down a river.
Oh yeah,
and that was the thing. It's like, oh, all right, now we figured
all
out
right, all right.
how
Well,
we figured.
a third water ride.
Well, no, you shut down Popeye.
Oh my!
And you retheme it around the Hobbit. And
Oh.
but it was the whole notion of what if we, for example, what if we built a Hobbit village up on the hillside and hobbits are all about food and feasting and all that sort of thing. And the notion was that they wanted a second Harry Potter. They wanted
Right.
But the interesting thing is Universal has now pivoted to the idea of, well, look, we don't want to license other people's IP. We want to use our IP. And so that's the thing right now is they are looking at this chunk of real estate. And again, if you do Google Maps and look at how much land Toon Lagoon occupies, I mean, it's a giant chunk of real estate.
Right. I mean, that amphitheater alone.
Yeah.
So
I guess what I'm saying is on the other side of Epic Universe opening next year in 2025, do not be surprised if this section of the park goes behind construction fences, or at the very least, the actual Main Street section of Toon Lagoon. That I think in the long run, they will save Dudley, they will save Bilge-Rat. But if you look at the rest of it, if you look from the quick service and all that that's now gone seasonal, and the shops, taking into account the games and the theater on the hillside, a lot of real estate, you could do something interesting in there. So
so get your Dagwood sandwich now.
There we go. So all right. So
well, Jim, that was lovely. Thanks for indulging me with some of my my water ride attraction memories, I guess.
No. Proud of you doing it. In fact, I have long thought of doing exactly what you talked about there, going into the park with Crocs and a thing, and just and riding them. Because I have to tell you, the one and only time I rode Dudley Do-Light Ripsaw Falls, I was in the back of the car. It went under the exploding house and came up. I hit the back of my head so hard, I don't remember the rest of the ride.
Then what? The bubbles come up with like the little exclamation points and stuff. You're in cartoon world. So
There we go.
You saw birds?
There, I saw birds. I saw little birds going around my head.
Well, there we go.
Okay.
Well, hey. So, Jim, thank you very much. So I think that's enough for the water-based attractions.
Okay.
Right.
That works.
We'll do something next week different.
Okay. And all right. So how about now that we've done with the water attractions, we'll go indoors. And next week being our very first episode for the month of October, the scary stuff. And who was the master of scary? But Alfred Hitchcock. And he worked a lot for Universal, and there were attractions. So why don't we talk about him on the next show?
Well, Jim, I'll tell you what, I will get right to work then. As soon as we're off here, I believe he's had over 50 movies, so I got a lot of prep work to do.
There we go. Just going to lay one word out there, though. Psycho. Okay, just there we go. All right. Anyway, well, Eric goes off and watches 50 movies. Just want to remind you folks that that help this poor man. I mean, he'll need distraction. So in between watching the Trouble with Harry and Double Indemnity, where can people find you between movie viewings, Eric?
Well, Jim, maybe I'll live tweet some of those over at Eric Hersey on Instagram or Twitter. So how about you, Jim?
Oh, well, as always, you can find me on X, Twitter, and Instagram as Jim Hill Media, and over on Facebook as Jim Hill Media News. Okay, folks, so that is going to wrap things up for today. Want to thank you for listening to myself and Mr. Hersey, and stick around for what's coming this coming month on the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network. Thanks for listening to today's episode, and if you like what you heard, head on over to Apple Podcasts and give us a review. This really helps get the word out about our shows. We also have some other shows on the network that you might like. Each week, we drop a brand new Disney dish with Len Testa. For animation and movie news, please listen to Fine Tuning with Drew Taylor. By the way, you can also check out Drew's other podcast, Light the Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast, which he does with Charles Hood. For all things Lucasfilm, why don't you subscribe to Looking at Lucasfilm with Brian Gahn? Likewise, we have I Want That Too with the lovely Lauren Hersey, our weekly podcast that features the latest merch and the stories behind that merch. And our Epic Universal podcast takes a look at the Universal theme park. So please join Eric Hersey and I on that weekly. If you enjoy theme park history, we also host Manufacturing the Magic with Shelley and Noah Valladolid. That podcast tells the story of how we got the modern theme parks that we enjoy today. Join myself, Len Testa, and veteran Imagineer Jim Schul for our latest season of Disney Unpacked, our first ever video series exclusively for Patreon. These get released first Sunday of every month, and each month we release several exclusive podcasts to help support this video series. I want to thank everyone that supports the Jim Hill Media Network. For more information about our podcast and content, head on over to jimhillmedia.com. So that's going to do it for now, folks. Thanks again for listening, and we will catch up on the next show.